what's going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut album by rapper Killer Mike. Basically, this product is called Monster, and it came out in the winter of 2003. So basically, Killer Mike was kind of an affiliate and somewhat of a protege of Outkast back in the early 2000s as far as pitches like that kind of happened. I don't know exactly when he particularly surfaced, but it's been around since at least the Stankonia days as far as those pitches can happen. Good affiliates, definitely good conduct to get like the original Outkast pairing with Andre 3000 and Big Boy on there, and then adding Killer Mike to the mix. It's a good trio batches gonna have for some of that conduct. But yeah, some good pitches gonna have these Killer Mike type projects, just because this has a little bit of Outkast on here, not full blown Andre 3000, is at least somewhat on the song Action. It kind of has like some background vocals from them as far as those pitches kind of happen. But I look after it, some of the stuff that the Dungeon family was kind of doing in like the early 2000s, I didn't know as much full blown about some of this. I remember Killer Mike from some of these type of fashions back in those particular days, but he didn't really break even in terms like the more mainstream type spotlight until like more of like the late 2000s and 2010s, even as far as those pitches going to happen. With some excellent type stuff here, getting with this particular album, just a good taste of some of these type fares, just another classic rendition of some southern hip hop that just had a lot of appeal. But yeah, I would say Killer Mike was kind of more in the trenches around these particular times. Had some good appearances on Stankonia, had some good appearances on Big Boy's 2003 album Speaker Box, some of those type fares I'd have to say. He might have been on previous albums by Outkast, not really as full blown sure, like Aquamini or some of those type ones, but some good type fare. I want to say Dungeon Family might have dropped like a group collaboration album that might have had some of that. I'm gonna have to get to some more of those type products, but yeah, this is a classic album here. Just have to go ahead and say it's kind of a left field type one. It's just kind of the pitch. I mean, not necessarily left field, but it's just kind of more, not as much full blown. It's not as much like a dazzler in terms of like vanilla rap. It's not as much like a super dazzler in terms of like commercial forefront as far as those pitches gonna happen. But Killer Mike did get a lot better later. But I do feel like this album is a classic just within the pitch. It just has not so much like a learning curve, but it's just a little bit more like, just would have to say, it just doesn't have like the bombastic kind of single like you would know from like Outkast hits around that time that he was featured on like The Whole World and some of those type ones, or some of his features when he has Big Boy on there. I do think I like the fact that Outkast kind of helps bolster some of his initial singles to kind of get his name in people's heads as far as those pitches kind of happen to kind of have that particular appeal. But and this does have some commercial turn up, I would say, just about. It's just kind of the fact, it is kind of unfortunate that Killer Mike didn't catch on sooner, because some of these type of appeals, maybe it was just like, I don't know, it doesn't matter. But just within the pitch, this is a classic here. It's going to get a rave high grade type score as far as those pitches going to happen. It's an underappreciated one. Shouldn't have slept on it back in the day when I did as far as those pitches going to happen. I do remember some of his late 2000s and early 2010s projects, but this is some good stuff here. So yeah, distinct debut just within the pitch behind it, just lacks like the commercial bite. I think some of these songs at least did good on like the relative rap charts, but it's this kind of thing. So I mean, I'll go ahead and basically there were 2 singles off this album, and there's 16 songs on here, and out of those 16 I wound up recommending 13, but really minus the intro there's actually 15, so I wound up recommending 13 songs out of 15 on here. So the only 2 songs I don't recommend is just Monster, the title track, and then Dragon, which we'll get to. So I'll go ahead and just talk about the singles here. So the first single is Action. This has like Outkast kind of backing vocals and just extra kind of work on the song. Kind of similar to how when Pharrell would feature on Jay-Z songs, like when you think of a song like that song that Pharrell did with Jay-Z off the Black Album. I forget what that one's called. Can't really remember what the name of the song is called. It's not Frontin', but it's the other one. It's like Change Clothes as far as those pitches going to happen. It does not actually say Jay-Z featuring Pharrell. It's kind of the same concept with this particular one. But on this particular album, Wikipedia and some of these folks do say that Outkast features on the song Action, but they don't actually drop verses. There's not a verse from Big Boy or Andre 3000 on here, but it just has their extra kind of has their extra kind of contributions that I'd say. But Action is like a bouncy kind of electro club heat to kind of get here to some good buzz noise and commotion. I would feel like it's kind of buzz noise commotion initial kind of Killer Mike kickoff to kind of have good concept for some of that debut type stuff kind of get, and this is like a good jumper to kind of have. So I do appreciate the appeal. It's some good frolic. This feels like a standard kind of vanilla kind of 2000s, early 2000s era Southern club jumper as far as this pitch kind of happen. Not quite crunk, but also not quite as much vanilla rap just within the tone. It's just kind of on the verge. That is something that's a good concept kind of have for some in-between type moments. This is kind of what I talked about more here, that it just kind of felt more in like hardcore rap type territory, but definitely had the good product of having the amalgamation behind it. But it was a little bit sketchier, not so much sketchier in terms of quality, but just the concept of just not having like the commercial gloss about it. But it is an excellent song to be able to say within the tone. Do appreciate the dance club bounce. Basically kind of like Big Boy's kind of ghetto music from like speaker box as far as those pitches, kind of having that same sort of tone where it's a good song, but it just didn't catch on within the tone behind it. But it's just kind of the appeal that is some nice stuff. But it does have Andre 3000 at the beginning and Big Boy on there as far as this pitch going to happen. But Adidas is the second single, and this is a nice one. Now, this one particularly has a Big Boy verse on here, which is a pretty good pitch. It's not necessarily, I feel like this song kind of was a good song, but I can see the reason why it might have not as full-blown kind of caught on, just because it's not really as much like a dance club or something real festive or something like that. This is kind of more picnic type music, but the song is like a plucky and kind of springtime, kind of out and about, I'd have to say, to some picnic and kind of balmy smoke session type stuff to kind of get for like some outdoors type fare to something like that. Just kind of more typical kind of April type music, quilts out pitches like that, just standard kind of almost bonnet type music for ladies as far as those pitches kind of happen. It just kind of has like that 70s like kind of frolic about it. Now I would say I don't think Killer Mike is within the aspect of not wanting to smoke with some of these. It's kind of a more, it's relatively plain and just kind of like mild kind of energy as far as those pitches kind of happen. Just aiming for some of that commercial fare, but probably just needs some of the little bit more bite. I do like this song as well. I would probably listen to Action more oftenly, and I do also like the remix of that song, Reaction, but this is kind of the tone that it just really feels like something that you would have gotten from like one of those folks out of the 70s, like when you think of Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, just some of that standard kind of city hop typeness, just going to the park, something like that, playing frisbee, some of that type of music, just smoke sesh just in like the park, something like that. I'd say if you're just not getting in trouble, it's kind of within the tone, but good type fare. So yeah, like I was saying, the only two songs I don't recommend on here would just be Monster and then Dragon. Both of these are just kind of, there's some songs on this project that do have similarities to Tech 9, which I do like the appeal of, just these rumination type songs that just some standard commerce and just out and about, just kind of in a more kind of just not necessarily full-blown blue collar, but just like the aspect of, just within the aspect of more standard day-to-day type pitches, just within a more kind of typical like this relative workaday type fare, I'd say, just within the tone behind it. I mean, I feel like Tech 9 pulls out these particular ones, but I kind of feel like Monster is kind of like a brooding type one. I do like some of the morose type energy, but I don't know, somehow the mixture behind that song just didn't nail it nearly as well as it probably needed to. It just had a lot going on within that particular song. I feel like if there had been more instrumental to that song and just hadn't been as much noise on that particular song, it probably would have been a little bit more of a vicious type one, but it just kind of, I felt like it was just a messier song than it was probably needed to be. And then Dragon was kind of the same thing. I kind of like Dragon was just kind of a more bruised type day, just for a more ruffled type fare. I feel like Sex, Drugs, and Rap and Roll just I feel like Sex, Drugs, and Rap and Roll just pulled out that vibe a lot better compared to that particular song. There's some other ones like You Know I Love You just had some of that particular type fare, just nailed it within a better aspect. And there's probably some other ones on here. There are some work shift type ones within that pitch, like I was saying. Rap is dead, some of these type ones. But that's about the only two minor snags about this particular product as far as those fairs going to happen. Just kind of like, I feel like Dragon was just like a worse version of Sex, Drugs, and Rap and Roll, just within the pitch behind it. And Monster was kind of a brooding type one, but just had a lot going on that just wasn't as much melded. So I just look at it. But yeah, this album's a classic. Just what I have to say. When I say classics, more personal within that sense, I realize just within the fair that in terms of like the number ones and like the huge kind of commotion of songs, if you're looking for something that's going to be like life of the party, I feel like Killer Mike in some senses is not as much like a casual kind of, it's not so much to say like he doesn't have quality songs, just kind of within the aspect that he's just not normally as connecting within the tone. I mean, Outkast has made more noise, and when you think of like some of these folks like T.I. or Lil Jon or Bone Crusher even, that just have a little bit more social commotion. I mean, he has some good moments, but you have to be more with like the hardcore rap type movement to have some appreciation. There are some ones on here. There's definitely some ones like Live, Reaction, Action, and like some other ones like Creep Show's pretty good, and just songs like that, just within that relative type fare, that do have like some of that liveliness just about it. But in terms of something that's going to be catching just immediately, like Disco Inferno by 50 Cent or Just Lose It by Eminem, some of those type ones, more standard, or Way You Move by Big Boy, some of those type ones that were more faces of like vanilla rap around the early and mid 2000s, it just may not have that as immediate. I still would have to say this album's going to get a 10 out of 10. So just to talk about some of these on here, like Home of the Brave is a nice one. It's like a vintage kind of mid 2000s ATL Club Noise. It's another one of those ones I was talking about that has some immediate casual factor just within a relative sense. I mean, it's in a hardcore, but one just having the familiarity with it helps. The song feels like a DJ drama kind of mixtape cut kind of get here, and this is some great get crunk kind of energy. So this has a cat on here named Slim Calhoun. Apparently he's another affiliate of like the Dungeon family. I'm gonna have to get to some of his stuff. I know he at least has one album that came out in 2001. I don't know if he has mixtapes, so I'm gonna have to see about that. But I do remember him being on like the Big Boy album, Good Fare for that. Good type pitches. So this is just one that feels like a typical kind of just ATL sludge as far as some of those type fares, like folks like Bone Crusher, Lil Jon, T.I., some of those type folks that are making similar songs to this. Just that same sort of fare. If you like songs like Never Scared, just with a little bit less catchiness and like the overall chorus pitches like that. It's a great song, with just kind of the aspect just more hardcore. I'd have to say it's a good aspect for some of these. Another song like that is Live. It's like a super house party and vivid kind of commotion conduct to kind of get here. More local than Action, I'd have to say just more around the house. I feel like Action's just a good dance club bounce, kind of get some electro heat, but this one is particular. This is a pretty good people pleaser and a great song to toke up to. I'd say just more kind of just amongst the commotion, some of that type fare, just dap type music like crazy, just getting the hard liquor bottles, some of that type fare, showing up with like the Bacardi and some of that type stuff as far as those pitches can happen. It's more kind of standard noise, great early 2000s local type fare. Another real blitzing type one is Reaction. Now this is like a stock kind of typical crazy ATL turn up like Bone Crusher and Lil Jon from like their 2003, 2002 days. That I'd say very gnarled club blitz of a song kind of get here, and this is some great go crazy music kind of have. So this one just reminds, this should definitely be like a clone damn near of just like Never Scared and some of those type ones, just some of those type songs that you remember from those times. Get Low, some of those type pitches, just real has that appeal. Killer Mike's pretty good at honing this particular energy, and he does this a number of times. Killer Mike is not someone that doesn't have songs as far as those pitches going to happen, and just kind of the concept that, I don't know, it just felt like he didn't ever get to the point of having like his own hit to have those particular ones that like his version of Get Low or his version of like Never Scared, some of those type pitches. He was just kind of more in the background. You have to kind of search for him a bit, but these are some great songs. Definitely, I'm listing some of the casual kind of nightclub songs immediately to get to some of these. But Rap is Dead is a quality one. It's like a lively kind of out and about kind of with in between day kind of. It's like a lively kind of out and about type song with like an in between day kind of beat. I'd have to say just reminds me of Tech Nine and just like some ho hum to like some ho hum day type fare. I'd say, and the song pounds pretty well. It just has a lot of good bounce of energy. Just really reminds me of something Tech Nine, Cut Calhoun, Chris Calico, some of those type folks. Just more kind of in between the trenches. Just picking up swishers today, getting some local KFC, some of that type fare. Just some good conduct. Just about what particularly kind of happens. Just getting some bills paid, some of that type fare. But just kind of it being in a jolly and relatively festive type mood. Just to be able to say it's just kind of in between type day, but it has the energy of just having a good in between day as far as those pitches can go. So some good pitches for that. Creep Show is a quality one. It's like an oozing and kind of freakish pseudo horrorcore sleaze kind of get here. It has some good snaz, and this is like an unlikely kind of bizarre cameo hit to kind of get. Pretty dope song kind of has an interesting pitch kind of get Killer Mike on some of this horrorcore. This feels like a song that more of King Gordy and Bizarre should have been on more so than Killer Mike, but I do like the appeal. Bizarre feels right at home on a song like this. Just a good tone to kind of get some of these. Do like the appeal getting some of this type one. Just some more gothic typeness, just interesting type fare circuit like these tons. It's the only thing missing from this song is King Gordy as far as those pitches kind of happen just within the tone behind it. Excellent typeness. If you do miss like the mixtape type era, All For You is a nice one for that. It's like a vintage kind of 2000s DJ drama mixtape soul to kind of get here. Good local errands and ruminate type song kind of have just some smoke up and typical kind of track to kind of have just within that fare. House cleaning type music, standard day, just pitches like that, just within the tone of just like more rumination, just within the aspect of just local kind of out and about, just good concepts for some of that typeness, just to get just typical kind of DJ drama, Don Cannon type fare, just within the tone. Do you like the concept of seeing some of these type songs on an album? For the most part, that didn't happen as much. Like I want to say that Jeezy, Lil Wayne, some of those type folks didn't really put these types of songs, but it's just basic your kind of quality and hit chipmunk soul as far as those pitches kind of happen with it. Just some good type fare for some of that. It was just good to kind of have some of that fare just reflect on some of those type ones that had like the Blueprint by Jay-Z kind of influence some of those type ones with that soul. So it's a good pitch. The last song on this particular album. Now the thing about this album is just the fact that there's a lot of interludes on this particular album. This is actually Hard Nard is actually song 30, but it's kind of similar to like what Korn did on like I want to say their like Follow the Leader album, where they just had like 4-second snippets, which is just within the pitch behind it. But I look after it, Hard Nard is basically like good song here. It's like a nice rap rock kind of rowdiness that has it's another one of the casual type ones when the album's crazier joints kind of get here. Goes great with live. I would definitely feel like this is just some great blackout kind of turn up. So this is definitely one to get real pitched too, just within the tone, just really get turned up. I mean, obviously have the responsibility factor within it, but it's just a great tone to have some crazy factor just get within that. Just some excellent type type fare, because I mean, these songs were on some of these particular type albums, but this one's just a little bit more crazier than usual, I'd have to say. So it's a good type pitch to kind of have some of those. You know, I love use a nice one. It's like an oozing kind of neighborhood evening commerce kind of get here. This is one of those type ones, like I was saying, in a more makeshift type sense than like a slummish type sense. It's a ruffled day, kind of long work day type fare, long work day kind of afterthoughts that I had to say about this one. So it's some Tech Nine type fare just within that tone, just the aspect of kind of like it's kind of bad hair day type fare as far as those pitch kind of happen. Just the standard kind of typical makeshift as far as those pitch kind of happen. It's good to see some of these on like a 2000s type fare, because you know most folks Killer Mike was kind of trap, like this is kind of somewhat of a trap album, but it's also somewhat of like a minor makeshift album to some of that type fare that Tech Nine was going to do it on Absolute Power and Ever Ready the Religion. Kind of is like a conduit for some of that, just having some of those in between type moments, just realizing that. I mean, I would say it's Hustler's makeshift, but I also feel like in a certain sense, to a certain degree, it's almost kind of blue collar makeshift as well. Just some of these type ones. There's definitely some ones on here. Like I feel like Rap is Dead, You Know I Love You, like Sex, Drugs, and Rap and Roll, Dragon. Some of these type ones just have some of that relative type appeal, just in between type days, and just more standard makeshift that I say. But it's a good. This is one of the more fairing type ones that did it well. This has a really great hook on here. This probably has one of the best hooks on this particular album. This Jay Sweetcat did an excellent job with it. Scared Straight is a nice one. It's like a typical kind of slummish commerce that has just in between kind of food for thought type song kind of get here. It just reminds us once again of Tech Nine and Chris Calico, some of those type fares. Just an overall dope type song. So this one, Scared Straight, is like a real lackadaisical type one. Just typical kind of day, just standard fare, just errands type music, just standard kind of just get some simple drive through, something like that. Standard errands, some of that typeness, just be able to have just good concept for that. Then Blow, Get Down is a nice one as well. It's like a usual kind of back on the summer prowl kind of conduct that has just smoke up and cruise around just within the fare behind it. Some good goodies for all to kind of get within that tone. Just pick up some snacks and smoke some of that type fare. Hit up Chicas on the cell. Just some pitches like that. Just standard kind of day. Just usual. This just reminds me of like Nelly and T.I. Some of those type folks. Just kind of the conduct. This is just like back on your BS type fare as far as those pitches kind of happen. Just standard antics. Just June, July, August. Some of that type fare. Just getting back on the grind and or not. Yeah, just back on like the usual conduct as far as those pitches kind of happen. It feels like a factory and kind of one of the more vanilla Killer Mike songs kind of get here, but it is a good concept for that. And then Sex, Drugs, and Rap and Roll is a nice one. It's like a beleaguered and malaise kind of neighborhood commune that I have to say about this one. Just some long day kind of rumination. So it's just kind of the fare of work was kind of pestering today, just some of that type fare, just an in-between type one. It's a little bit more of one where you're not possibly going to go smoke up and just kind of relish a bit and just kind of get back to like standard recreation, but just kind of one where it's like, hey, I'm a little bit bruised today, just kind of not so much in the full-blown mood, just kind of rumination where it's like maybe you got some conducts, maybe you got some last-minute conducts to clean up as far as those pitches kind of happen. Just the factoid of just getting some of that extra type stuff done, and just kind of the commerce of just a bruised kind of day and just the fare behind it. So this is a typical kind of malaise day in the life as far as those pitches kind of happen, but it just works with some great rumination if you do have a long day. Some of those type fares going to get. So that's the excellent type fare. So yeah, this album basically gets a 10 out of 10. Just some excellent typeness, just like I gave Pledge Allegiance to the Grind 2. That was another excellent type one, just another classic going to get within that pitch. So some excellent type fare. I remember giving Killer Mike's 2006 mixtape a pretty relatively high score as well. It's another high grade type one, and it's free, so I'd recommend downloading that, checking out the Killer Mike playlist as far as those pitches kind of happen. There is some more Killer Mike on the way. It's pretty excellent to get this one as a classic. Like I said, in terms of casual type appeal, the social score, that's kind of tricky. I think I'll give the social score like a 9.25 because I feel like the fare behind it does have some gems on here, but it's just kind of within the concept that the unfortunate thing about it is just the fact that Killer Mike does not have the full-blown kind of casual bite, even with like the Outkast and Big Boy backing as far as those pitches kind of happen. It's definitely some excellent type fare, but if you are looking for number ones, number twos, number fives, some of those type pitches, this is not in full-blown stock and supply. Now this is his debut here. It was kind of the come up of him getting his foot in the door as far as albums were kind of pumped out, and this is a classic just within the tone, but I just look after it. The songs are definitely on here in quality, but it's just more in a hardcore type sense. He did get more casual bops later, and he does have the budget and some of those type fares, but it's just kind of the concept of this, questioning if folks are going to say who, when, you know, kind of like with, if folks are going to say who, kind of like they do with Mike Jones when you say some new Killer Mike music or something like that. It's not to say he doesn't have the popularity, but it's just kind of, he's just not as much of like a full-blown household name. It's just within the pitch, but I look after it. So in terms of the future, like Killer Mike dropped an album in like August of 2024, so he has some stuff. He won Album of the Year for his 2023 album, Michael, which came out, which is a pretty good pitch. Kind of get that one. I'm going to get to some more of these type ones. Like I said, there's more Killer Mike on the way, but this is a classic here, an underappreciated classic, and it's easy enough to recommend.